This is Verity Seeker, and I'm your host, Mark Powls. I'm going to share an interview with you that I did with my oldest daughter, Bethany Powls. She's currently attending Bethel College in Newton, Kansas, and she's written an editorial that I think everyone needs to hear. Here's the interview. Okay, I've got a special guest here today. This is kind of a last-minute deal. I've got my oldest daughter, Bethany Powls, on a podcast. Yes. And this is kind of a special event for me because this doesn't happen every day. I think we had one video that we did last December in 2020. You remember that one we did with our family and boom.
Damn it, Jim.
I hope that's still not recorded.
No, it'd be better if it was.
Now this one's a little more serious, and Bethany's got some things to kind of update everyone on it, her from the point of view of a college student. So Bethany, glad you could do this. I know this is odd because you're my daughter and I'm your old man dad, but I feel this is necessary, and I'm happy that you decided to go ahead and do this. Tell us where you are right now and kind of give us an idea of the environment you are in. And let's go ahead and start with that.
So I'm Bethany Powls, and I attend Bethel College at North Newton, Kansas, which is about 2.5 hours away from where I live normally. And I am living on campus. And the school is at about 500 people this year. Recruitment was up a lot. So the freshman class is a lot bigger, a lot more people around. And as far as campus environment goes in regards to restrictions, they basically have similar rules in place from last year. Last year felt a lot more restrictive. People tended to be more strict about wearing masks inside of buildings, and they were like, you have to wear them outside too, all the time. And I felt nervous going for a walk on a public trail in Newton without having a mask on because I thought someone would call me out for it outside on a walk or a run. Now I can walk basically anywhere on campus and, enter a building and then put on a mask. And no one really bats an eye at that because everyone's doing it. You can tell who's vaccinated typically, not necessarily by whether or not they wear a mask, but because they're the ones complaining about people who aren't vaccinated very loudly. And there are a lot of people who stay very quiet and very much mind their own business. I would say that that's the majority of the campus. But they are still enforcing masks for people who are unvaccinated. Like I said, they haven't really questioned anyone. And then typically in all indoor spaces, except no one listens to that rule in the cafeteria, and everyone just sort of doesn't wear their mask. So that's sort of how, and then in dorms, it's technically supposed to be required, but no one does. So that's sort of how campus looks as far as masks go. Pretty regularly, we see like an update from the campus that's like, hey, this percentage of people are vaccinated. I think the last check-in was about 61%, and they really were kind of passive aggressive about it. They were like, community immunity, get the next few people vaccinated so that we can get to 75% and you won't have to abide by the restrictions anymore, which is a total lie because people who aren't vaccinated will still have to abide by those restrictions. So we get to see that in our email inbox very frequently. And then there are always like clinics and options and things like that. And they're always buying vaccines. So that's sort of what everything looks like. And then in each syllabus, there's always a clause that's like, you have to wear your mask or you might be kicked out of the class, essentially. If you need an exemption, go see administration, but they're not actually granting exemptions because, we would have been granted those exemptions had that actually been a thing for religious purposes and medical purposes. So that just goes to show that that's not actually a thing. It's just there in writing. So yeah, that's sort of what everything looks like right now on a college campus that's only 500 people.
Okay, very good. that kind of gives us an idea of the environment that you're working in right now. It's not really overly strict, but
Not as much anymore.
yeah, when you go into a building, you do have to at least gesture that you are putting on the mask. And then whatever you do after that point, as long as it looks like you're making an attempt, you're okay.
It depends on the professor, and how many people you're with. Honestly, right. You kind of read social signals. That's regardless of your vaccination status, people are just reading what everyone else around them. I went to a cross country meet this morning and no one had their mask. No one. But I know that my choir teacher was there and he kind of looked at me funny, because he knows how I feel about certain things. But I didn't put one on because we were outside, and I saw him start to put his on and then decided not to.
Good for him.
I don't know if that, yeah, I can't interpret that, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's probably all that can be said about that part of the deal. You have a job on the campus, right? Can you explain what that job is and how you obtained that particular job? Can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So when I was a freshman, I was contacted by the campus newspaper's editor-in-chief, Elizabeth, and she was like, "Hey, you are an aspiring English major, and I think you would be a really good writer for the newspaper." And so I wrote for the newspaper for a year and then was approached by leadership, so the faculty advisor and then the editor-in-chief, and they asked if I wanted to be the next editor-in-chief. And so I had a little bit of training, not too much, but a little bit, and then sort of was thrown headlong into 3 years of work as the editor-in-chief. This is my third year. And so I oversee all of the newspaper essentially. And the only person that I really get to answer to is the faculty advisor. I have a sort of a board of editors for the different sections of the paper that I instruct and oversee, and they offer feedback and, make decisions when I delegate that. And then we all oversee the writers and photographers. And that's sort of what my job looks like. We produce 12 issues a year, 6 each semester. So it's been a lot of work for sure. Yeah. And this semester is important to note that I'm not doing it for payment. I am taking it for college credit because it's applying to my minor. I needed sort of like production, hands-on time on the degree check. So that's why I'm not getting paid this semester. I'm just doing it for credit. And then I'm also a tutor on campus. That's the other job I get paid for. Normally that factors in, but it's not pertinent to the collegian. So.
Okay. So now you're not only do you have that, which consumes a lot of your time on campus, but you are also a history and English major, trying to get through your last year of
senior
college.
Year.
Yeah.
I'm almost done. I'll be free in like 8 months.
Yeah. Then the work begins, right?
Right. Now I had to think the other day, I was like, oh, I should actually start looking for jobs. Anyway.
Yeah, that'll work out. I think you got good things are going to happen. You're going to make a difference in the world. Okay. And which brings me to, now we can segue into the whole reason for this interview. You had decided to write in the Collegian an editorial. And from my understanding, from hearing clips of what you were working on as a draft, it sounded really good to me, and it sounded like something that people needed to hear. Would you mind reading that? Before you do that, can you tell me what it's about and why you were moved to write this editorial?
So every year, editors are all required to write one editorial. And it can be about any issue that they really feel passionately about. Last year, I wrote 2, and they were both very brutal, I guess is the word I would say. I think the college has learned to expect that from me, because I was really critical about, whose voices are we allowed to hear? What exactly is censored in the classroom, as someone who has been censored in the classroom, based on my political and religious views. I felt the need to write that, and it attracted some attention at the administrative level, but there hasn't been really any more feedback as far as that goes. So I'm sort of getting used to just writing things that I know people aren't going to be happy with here at Bethel College, and that's fine because I'm leaving. Anyway, so I had a friend who I'm just going to say has a higher position that gets to hear a lot of what's discussed at the administrative level. And there was talk, he actually approached me and he was like, "Hey, I have tea for you." We joke about the fact that he needs like a burner phone that he feeds me all of like the juicy, newsworthy stuff, and then we write about it in the paper. But he was like, "I have some information for you, and I think you need to write an article on this." And he told me that with everything going on with this whole federal mandate thing for employers and vaccination, the school is sort of in a place where they're thinking that they should mandate vaccines for all faculty and student employees. So not the student body, but people who work for the school, which would essentially be a huge portion of people. And I'm not sure that it would affect too many people because 61% are already vaccinated. But it's the principle of the matter. That's the issue. And he was like, as a vaccinated person, I don't agree with this at all. It's not ethical, and it's not something that the school should even consider doing. But I've noticed that as I clock in for work on our app, the app that we use for work is already telling us, "Hey, this is how you like manage the situation when your employees don't want to vaccinate." And like there are little advertisements that pop up that are like, how you as an employer can like comply with this requirement, things like that. And I'm like, oh, it's coming for me. Like even if the school doesn't require it, the app that we use as an institution is going to push them to. So I really don't know what they're going to choose in the long run, but I felt the need. I told my friend, I was like, "Hey, I already have an editorial written about like the importance of state elections." And he was like, "Write another one because this is going to be more important to the student body right now." And I was like, "Okay, fine." So I have a draft here. And you asked me to read the unabridged draft. I didn't actually edit much out. In fact, I probably put more in. Went from being like 800 words to about 1,000 words, which is
nice.
So we'll have to see what actually gets published. But you want me to go ahead and read that now?
Yes, I would like the version that you've got there. This is okay. This will be great. Thank you.
And the title's a little rough too, but I titled it "Legitimacy of Liberty in Exchange for Temporary Security."
Wow.
Temporary security. Okay. The events of the past week have left quite a few people on unsettled footing as far as their job and basic livelihood goes. While much of my audience probably does not agree or chooses not to agree on principle, a president issuing a weird sort of federal mandate requiring all federal employees to be vaccinated just screams totalitarian regime. And when people seek me out and say, "Time to write something that matters to the student body," then it is time to write just that. First, let's talk about Biden's mandate for federal employers, soon to extend to the private sector, allegedly. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go inform yourself because this stuff is so very important. If you do know what I'm talking about, I will tell you why it's illegitimate. It directly violates basic human rights. Frankly, the last 2 years have been one massive violation of human rights, and good luck getting those back. And yet, it doesn't surprise me that an entire room full of people that can't sit quietly and respectably through a presentation about the Kansas State Constitution would think that there is anything wrong with this. That's specifically targeting the Bethel community, who couldn't sit through a presentation on the Kansas State Constitution. I have one point here. This mandate, like the others, is not in the enumerated powers of the president. See Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution. Nor is it an enumerated power delegated to the general government. Only Congress can make laws, and those laws must be pursuant to the U.S. Constitution. Otherwise, it is in the hands of individual states. See Amendment 10 of the U.S. Constitution. I am so proud of those states that are already standing up to protect their people. Additionally, no general government official can violate a state's constitution. The Kansas State Constitution actually both protects religious liberty and religious exemptions under Amendment 7 and cites citizens as the ultimate source of authority under Amendment 2. Keep your power as a citizen. What you sacrifice now, you will have to fight tooth and nail to get back. I would rather not have to fight. Thank you very much. Bethel students might be thinking, why does this matter? I'm vaccinated. Or why does this matter? They would never force me to vaccinate. You're right, they can't, because this is not something the federal government can just mandate away. However, guess what? Your school takes federal funding. That's right. Your private institution takes so much money from the federal government that it's likely the Bethel administration will feel pressured to force all student and faculty workers to vaccinate, test weekly, or lose their jobs. If you thought this could never be a reality, think again. As far as exemptions go, I'm at a loss as to why they are suddenly not a good enough reason to get this vaccine. A simple no should be good enough. Know that if anything about this vaccine is against your religious, medical, or philosophical conditions and convictions, you are more than entitled to say no. As for employers who feel threatened by the federal government, know that it is not within their power or right to make you enforce this mandate or refuse exemptions. You can and you should grant your employees exemptions. Also, it is important to note that you will have to pay your employees workmen's compensation in the event of adverse reactions. Additionally, employers can be sued when your employees have adverse reactions or if they die. I'm just saying. Exemptions are important because they are foundational to values, to personal experience, and to critical thinking skills. I'm not sure I've ever encountered a time in my life, 21 years, when people were so quick to discredit and dismiss others' incredibly legitimate perspectives. It's honestly horrifying and the complete antithesis to one of the primary focuses in my Bethel Humanities courses, which is empathy. Here's a thought. Once a vaccine is mandated and everyone has taken it, willingly or unwillingly, regardless of medical, philosophical, or religious exemptions, who gets to pick up the pieces? Who takes the liability for the damage done? Because, as science and experience have proven, they are neither foolproof nor entirely safe. Who gets to decide what other medical procedures are mandated? I apologize for that imagery, but who gets to decide? Because if this moves forward, it will probably not be you. I understand that it is within human nature to want to control what we think we can control, but sometimes that is not the ethical decision to make. Recently, a professor of ethics in Canada was told that she must vaccinate. Her decision? She chose to educate her students one last time on the power of ethical decision-making and personal choice before her university fired her and banned her from campus. The video of her final class period was then censored from YouTube. This is a hard example to stomach. I understand that it is within human nature to want to control what we think we can't control, but sometimes that is not the ethical decision to make. You cannot force one medical procedure and not expect it to spiral out of control from there. I could argue about the effectiveness of vaccines, hospital procedures, alternative remedies, and natural immunity all day long, but that's not the point of this editorial. The point is to make you think about how far as a society we have fallen and just how much farther we could go. Luckily for students who actually depend on jobs right now to pay for tuition, the Newton area has plenty of available job openings. My recommendation would be to leave any school job should this violation be enforced. As a parting note, one of the most profound quotes of the founding era of the United States comes from the one and only Benjamin Franklin, who's one of my favorite founding fathers. He said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. which to me is a very clearly defined statement. For those of you who worship at the altar of NPR, who recently published an article on this quote, this recent article might have you disagreeing, but I don't care. Franklin's statement rings truer now than it did 250 years ago. Your decision to take whatever safety precautions you choose to make should be yours and not the decision of others, and certainly not the decision of those who have money in the pot. The end.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay. Wow.
It's long. It's long.
That wasn't long. You know, when you have to get all the facts in there. Wow. I mean, I was listening to every word of that and I'm going, what more could you say?
And it's not like, I don't know. To me, hard facts shouldn't even have to be used. Like, you know, I heard the story about this Canadian professor just the other day, like right after I read this to you the first time, and looked all over the internet for her. And there are only a few people that have tried to get her information out there and get this story out there, because it's gone from YouTube. It's gone from social media. You can't find her if you try and Google her. Like, the story has just disappeared, because what she had to say in that class period was so important. And like the pictures from it, like she's just like she's crying. Her face is just red. And the fact that she was forcibly removed from campus the next day is just, it's mind blowing. Her last class period.
Yeah, I saw that video. You're right. It was very sincere and it was painful, painful to watch. Just very sad. Who would have thought we'd ever get to this point? But it will always come, you know, and I'm glad you're studying history, because those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it or recycle it in some fashion or another. And that's where we're headed. So we need good historians out there to tell the truth.
And you want to know what the sad thing is? The worst part is that some of the most adamant professors and colleagues that I have are involved in this class I'm taking on witchcraft and heresy, which is essentially not entirely what the title says. It's not, we're talking about witches the whole time. That's not it at all. It's essentially church history. And it shows just how closely tied church and political history are, and how quick authoritarian governments and organizations were to discriminate against and or, violate people who disagreed. And, every day I go to class and it's, people might be having fun and laughing and, talking about the Inquisition like it's nothing. But, the Inquisition started with people not tolerating alternative viewpoints, or not being willing to listen to and not accepting that other people believe different things. And I'm sorry, but people lost a lot as a result. And it's this big black stain on, the history of the world. I think there's a lot to learn from it.
Yeah.
I just find it ironic that that's a class that I'm taking this semester.
Yeah, it is odd. What a coincidence.
What a coincidence indeed.
My feeling is there are never any accidents. We may think these are coincidences, but I think we are set in a period of time in history for a purpose. And each one of us has to figure out what that purpose is. And I'll just leave it at that. Do you have anything else that you want to add before we close down this short interview?
I had a really bad day yesterday, a really, really bad day. And it was sort of one of those days where I could tell that my blood pressure was a little higher than normal. And, the meeting that I have after this relates to said bad day and a lot of the stuff that happened. But I had two people talk to me in one day on a bad day. One of them stopped me outside of our cafeteria, and he's a faculty member. He was like, "Hey, can we have coffee sometime? I want to talk to you about your political views, not in like an offensive, I disagree with you way, but I want to see where you fit on the spectrum and what you believe aligns with my beliefs, because I feel alone. I feel alone and I feel isolated, and it's hard to know what to do sometimes. And then 2 minutes later, I was printing something in, for all purposes, I'm just going to say the tutoring office. And one of my close friends, who's a foreign exchange student from Germany, was there. And he asked me if I was having a good day. And I said, no. And I said, but this happened. And I told him about the faculty member. And he was like, interesting you should say that, because right now in one of my business classes, I am having to debate the mandate. And I am firmly on the side where I disagree. I disagree with it 110%. And I was like, I would not have expected that of you. Why haven't we talked about this before? And so within 2 minutes, these two people were there to be like, hey, we probably agree on these things, and we feel alone, but we feel better knowing that like you agree, or you would be willing to stand with us, or you would be willing to speak out if you see this injustice. And so I think it's important. I'm not always the person who's like, I should say something about it. But the older I get, the less I care, especially here at Bethel, where I see a lot of injustice being committed. Yeah, and it was encouraging to hear. And I think that that's something that everyone should have or should be willing to do, to speak out and talk to people about it, and find like-minded people. And you're not going to find like-minded people if you don't say something.
Boy, that is true. I agree 100%. It is important for people to just speak their mind and say what they have to say.
And you shouldn't have to feel like you can't speak your mind. In my opinion, that's one of the most dangerous things.
And I think that's why social media, the big tech, is trying to shut people down. And they're trying to separate people. They're trying to isolate people. It's in the playbook, and we have to fight against that.
Yeah.
Well, Bethany, thank you very much for doing this interview. I know you have to go, and appreciate it very much. And good luck with next week. I hope your meeting works out okay.
Me too.
It will. Just stand your ground, be yourself, and you've got good footing on your side. You have a strong foundation. We know where that comes from.
And a good God.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and close this interview and let you get on your way, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks, okay?
Okay.
All right. So long.